Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
James walked over to the table and stood there. Rebecca looked shocked, her mouth wide open in disbelief. It was the saddest expression he'd ever seen her wear. Daniel tried to stand up, but James raised his hand and said, "No, Daniel, stay seated. If you get up, I won't hesitate to take you down, so please stay put. I don't want to cause a big scene here. I'm sorry to interrupt your moment, but Rebecca, I can't believe you pretended to be sick just to spend the weekend with him. You know there's no one I despise more than Daniel Adams. Coming to our special place, the spot where we first met, where I proposed, and where we shared so many happy memories, means a lot. It used to be very important to me, but not anymore, and neither are you. On our wedding day, you promised, I will never hurt you, and I will never make you stop loving me. To me, that's two broken promises because, first, I'm deeply hurt, and second, my love for you is fading away like ice in hot coffee. You know me better than anyone, Rebecca, and you know how I handle things. I look at the situation, figure out the problem, and seek a solution. Seeing you here with Daniel, I realize you want to date other men. I'm your husband, and I won't let you do that, so clearly, I'm the issue. My answer is to eliminate the problem, so that's what I'll do. You're free to date anyone you want now. I hope this jerk is worth it, Rebecca." As he turned to leave, James added, "Daniel, this isn't over, I'll see you around." I walked quickly to the exit and out onto the street. I hurried across Jefferson Street and around the corner toward the lobby of the Monarch Inn. I stood there out of view when I saw Rebecca rush out the door and onto the sidewalk in front of Luciano's. She desperately looked everywhere, trying to locate me, but she didn't spot me. When she didn't see me anywhere, her shoulders slumped, and she crossed the street, hailed a taxi, and headed south toward our condo a few blocks away. I was horribly upset, but I took some consolation in knowing that I had at least ruined her night with Ryan and also that she seemed to care enough to leave him and head home, hoping to find me there. She wouldn't. I waited a few more minutes to see what Dog did. It wasn't long before he came out, hailed a taxi, and left in the opposite direction. I decided to stay at the Carlton for a few days until I could figure out what to do with my life, so I went in and was able to get a room. You were probably wondering how we got to this point in time, so I will lay it all out for you. My name is James Carter, and of course, my wife's name is Rebecca. When I graduated from Princeton, I took a job as a software engineer working for Pinnacle Software, a software developer in Chicago. The owner of the company and my boss was Robert Shaw, and I have to say he was a pretty decent boss. I was able to work my way up in the company quite quickly and was actually pretty successful at what I did. At the second company Christmas party I attended, Nathan introduced me to his goddaughter Rebecca. She was the daughter of his best friend, and he had invited them to the party. I actually think he invited them so he could set me up with Rebecca. I was glad he did. Have you ever heard of love at first sight? Well, I was hit with it. I thought Rebecca was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen, and she was witty, funny, and everything else I could imagine I would want in a woman. Yeah, you can tell I was smitten. It didn't take long for me to dominate her night, and truthfully, I think she dominated mine too. We hit it off from the start and never looked back. As you read earlier, the party was at Luciano's, and it just kind of became our special place. 3 months later, while on a Saturday evening date at Luciano's, I asked her to marry me, and she jumped into my arms and said yes. We were married, and our lives just kept getting better and better. My career flourished, her career flourished, and we had many celebratory dinners at our place. We were married in 2018, and everything seemed to be going along great until approximately 6 months ago, when I started to get the feeling that the honeymoon was over. I know it isn't supposed to last forever, but I really wanted it to. I was almost certain that there wasn't anything going on behind my back, but of course, you could never be absolutely certain. It was just a feeling that the romance had diminished. I decided to do something about it and began planning a surprise getaway for the two of us. One of my best friends and former roommates, Edward Turner, worked with his father, George, in the software industry too, and in fact, was a customer of Nathan's company. I frequently had to make a trip to their offices in Boston, so I made my plans coinciding with one of the scheduled trips. Rebecca and I were supposed to go to Boston to meet with Logan and George and their wives, Sophia and Emily, respectively, for dinner on Friday night, then a brief meeting Saturday morning to discuss business, and then we were going to drive to Crystal Lake for a couple of days by ourselves, returning to Chicago on Tuesday night. My hope was that we would reconnect. Rebecca clearly gave off vibes that she didn't want to make the trip with me. She didn't know about the Crystal Lake aspect because I wanted it to be a romantic surprise to jumpstart our second honeymoon, but she kept balking at the idea, and I had to push a bit to get her to agree to go. Wednesday morning rolled around, and when I got up, Rebecca wasn't in our bed. I looked for her and found her in our spare bedroom sleeping. I whispered, "Rebecca, are you awake?" She stirred slightly and responded, "Michael, I got sick in the night and slipped out of bed so I wouldn't disturb you. I am really sick and just need to sleep some more. Will you call my office and tell them that I am sick and won't be in at all today, please?" I did as she asked and left her to sleep while I went to work. Around 10, I called her to see how she was feeling, and she said she was still sick. I said, "Well, I guess I will have to go to Boston alone, then." I didn't get a response to that, so I hung up the phone and immediately dialed Logan to let him know that I would be coming alone and see if they wanted to change any of the plans. Logan suggested that since Rebecca couldn't make it, perhaps they would cancel the Boston trip, and the two couples would just come to Chicago to meet with me Friday night, and then Saturday they could do some shopping on Magnolia Boulevard, and if Rebecca was feeling better, then we could have dinner Saturday night. I thought it was a wonderful idea, so I told him that I would make reservations for them at the Monarch Inn and would meet them across the street at Luciano's for dinner at 6 p.m. I called and canceled my flight, my hotel room in Boston, and all of the arrangements I had made for a car and for the hotel at Crystal Lake. I was disappointed, but what are you going to do? At 3 in the afternoon, I called Rebecca to see if she was feeling better and well enough that maybe she would join us for dinner, but I got a busy signal, and frankly, I forgot to call again because I was busy getting my presentation set up for Logan and George. Finally, at 5:30 p.m., as I was rushing out the door, I called again, but this time there was no answer, and it went to voicemail. I left her a message telling her what the plans were and took a taxi to Luciano's to meet with the Anders. We were having a cocktail at our table before our meal when, all of a sudden, Logan got a funny look on his face and said, "Michael, I am sorry, but this is going to upset you a great deal. Rebecca just walked into the restaurant and joined another man. They're behind you and to your left against the wall." "I am so sorry, Michael." I slowly turned in my chair so I could see her, and there she was with another man. I used that term loosely because it wasn't really a man, it was Daniel Adams. I hate him and always will. To make that long story short, I will simply tell you that he was engaged to my sister, Sophia, and literally left her standing at the altar. He finally showed up 2 days later at her door to tell her he just didn't want to get married. For weeks later, we saw his marriage license to another woman in the paper and a birth announcement 6 months after that. Sophia was crushed, and even though I feel she is better off without the cheating jerk, she has never quite gotten over the whole thing. So now you know why I call him dog, and why I hate him. Anyway, back to the present. To say I was shocked would be a gross understatement. I know I tried to say a few words but just stammered. I could see the shocked looks on everyone's faces and knew they felt sympathy for me. When I could finally speak, I said, "Well, isn't that something? Obviously, I am not going to be able to continue this evening with you. I am not going to just sit here and pretend I didn't see what we all have seen. I suggest you four continue your evening, and why don't we meet for breakfast tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. in your hotel coffee shop? I am quite certain I will be in better shape by then. Also, it is obvious that Rebecca and I will not be meeting you for dinner tomorrow night. I am really sorry, please forgive me." I hugged the ladies and both men, too, they were, after all, longtime friends, and walked over to the table where my wife was sitting. I am pretty sure that Logan followed a few steps behind just to make sure that everything would be all right. It wouldn't be, but I appreciated his concern for me. So we are back to the confrontation at their table and so forth, and I am in my room at the Carlton. I had turned off my cell phone while I was registering and figured I better turn it back on. There were several messages from Rebecca, but, like everyone else in my situation, I just deleted them without listening to them. As I deleted the last voicemail, my phone rang again, but I let it go to voicemail because I didn't want to hear a thing she had to say. When it beeped that there was a voicemail, I just deleted it and turned off the phone again. Saturday morning, I met with Logan and George to talk about our business relationship. I said, "Well, guys, I think there are going to be some significant changes taking place in my life, and I am not exactly sure what those are going to be. I would like to ask you to not sign the new contract Nathan sent to you. Can you give me a little time to see what shakes out with my marriage and my job? As you know, Nathan is Rebecca's father's best friend and her godfather. If you can, there may be a better deal for you out there later. If not, I certainly understand, but honestly, I don't see any harm in you going month to month with Nathan until my future is solidified. What do you think? As one, they replied, Michael, we will do as you ask. We're with Nathan because of you, and if your situation changes, we will always be with you. Let us know what we have to do, and when things change, we are here for you in any way you want us to be. I got tears in my eyes at that and again just hugged the two of them. Then the ladies walked into the restaurant, and it was time for them to drag their husbands off to spend their money. Logan's wife, Sophia, smiled and said, Come on, dear, your credit card is cold, and I think I need to warm it up for you. Emily, George's wife, said, I hope that George's cards are heat-resistant because we are going to slide them so many times today that they just might melt. It isn't often we get a chance to shop Magnolia Boulevard. I had to chuckle in spite of how I was feeling because I knew they were playing with their husbands and also trying to cheer me up. I loved them for it. Hugs all around, and off they went. I thought about going to the office to put some things in order but figured that Nathan might be there on a Saturday, and maybe even Rebecca would go there expecting I might turn up. I decided to stay away and go in on Sunday morning early to do what I figured I would need to do. I spent the rest of Saturday afternoon reading a book I picked up. The next morning, I went into the office and put a few things in order. I worked out the plan for what I would try to accomplish on Monday morning, then I went back to my hotel room with the Chicago Times and started looking at the advertisements for apartments. I knew that I couldn't stay at the Carlton for the long term, so I would have to do something else. When I had a few possibilities, I made some calls and set up appointments for Tuesday morning. When that was all set up, I settled down and decided to watch some football. Monday morning, I went to see my attorney, Thomas, who had been my attorney since I arrived in Chicago, and I asked him if he would have a problem representing me in a divorce action. He said, God no, Michael. You can't really expect me to believe you are divorcing Rebecca. You love her like nobody I have ever seen. I replied, Thomas, the key word here is love. It is now past tense because I don't love her anymore. If you don't want to represent me, fine, but all I would ask then is that you don't represent Rebecca either. He agreed. I would rather not represent either of you. I think you should try to work this out, Michael, but if you won't or can't, then you should use William Harris. I think he will do a good job for you, but please try to work it out, okay? I thanked him for the referral but said, no way are we going to work it out, Thomas. I just don't love her anymore. I met with Larry, and he assured me that he could have all of the paperwork ready to file by the end of the day on Tuesday, and Rebecca would be served Wednesday morning. A visit to my bank was the next order of business, and I got a cashier's check for half of our savings account. I left all of the money in our checking account because there would be bills to be paid up until the time our divorce was final. Rebecca and I had a specific arrangement when it came to our finances. We each contributed a set amount each month to cover the monthly operating expenses. We also put in a set amount for meals and entertainment and a certain amount to build a fund for furnishings and equipment, etc. That account had grown to a sizable amount because we always put in more than we used. That is why I left it, so it could pay bills until the divorce was final. We also each put about $850 per month into a savings account for vacations and holidays. I did take the 50% of that account. All of the rest of our individual earnings were our money to invest as we saw fit and use as we saw fit. My investment account and her investment account were completely separate and, in fact, with different brokers. I don't even know the value of her account, and I suspect she doesn't know the value of mine. Likewise, on our 401k plans, we each had those separately. The only thing we know about the other person's finances is the amount deposited each month into checking and savings. I took my cashier's check to a different bank locally and opened new accounts for me. The amount I deposited in checking was $42,000 and $180,000 in my new savings account. I took care of a few additional details, mainly financial, like insurances, etc., then figured it was time to go into the office and get things settled there. I had barely walked in the door when the receptionist, Anna, told me, Nathan wants to see you in his office immediately. I figured, well, here we go. When I knocked on his door, he called me in. "Come in, Michael," and closed the door. "I got a call from Rebecca." "What in the hell is going on?" I told him the whole story, and he asked, "What are you going to do now?" To which I replied, "I'm going to divorce her." Nathan's face showed his frustration as he said, "Oh no, you aren't, Michael. You're going to suck it up and work this out with your wife. There is no way you're going to divorce her and continue working here. Those are your choices, work it out with Rebecca, or I fire you." I looked stunned, or at least I pretended to look stunned, and said, "Nathan, are you telling me that my work isn't valuable enough for you to get around the fact that I am divorcing Rebecca? Haven't I done a good job for you? Have I broken any of the company rules or not followed company policy? You may have guessed by now that I had my phone recording this whole conversation. Michael, you do a great job for the company, and you're as straight-laced as it gets, always following the rules. You helped write the company policy, so I know you follow that. But Rebecca is my goddaughter, and I'm telling you that unless you work it out with her, I'm firing you. Do you understand?" I knew he was just trying to pressure me, but I was going to turn the tables and put the pressure on him. I didn't smile, though I wanted to at that point. Instead, I said in a sad voice, "Then, Nathan, you're going to have to say the words because I am divorcing Rebecca." He looked disappointed but said, "Michael, you're fired." I asked him to have security escort me to my office so I could remove the few things that I had left there. I did take a few things out on Sunday because I suspected this might happen. I'd known Nathan for a long time. When I got to my office, or should I say, former office, there were only a few things I wanted, so I packed them in a small box I had gotten from the storage room. As I was about to leave, Nathan said, "Michael, what about this picture?" It was a photo of Rebecca and me on our wedding day. She was beautiful in her wedding gown, and I have to admit I didn't look too shabby in my tuxedo either. A sadness overtook me for a moment, and I felt tears welling up. Oh yes, I always did love that frame. I picked up the picture, took off the back, dropped the picture into the trash bin, and put the frame in my box of belongings. When I turned to walk out the door, there stood Rebecca. She looked shocked, and there were tears streaming down her face. She had obviously seen me discard the wedding picture and felt the impact of that action. She asked in a subdued voice, "Michael, can we talk?" I only slowed down and halted my exit slightly to respond, "There's nothing to talk about, Rebecca. You already cheated on me, or were going to. You broke both promises you made to me on our wedding day. You hurt me so badly it broke my heart, and you did something that made me stop loving you. It's been said many times before, you can't unbreak a heart. What's left? Do you really think I will be able to get over you cheating on me? You know how much I hate Ryan after what he did to Sophia, yet you chose him to betray me with. No, Rebecca, there's nothing else to talk about." I continued walking out the door of my job and out the door of Rebecca's life. I called Logan and told him that Rebecca and I were divorcing and that I had been fired from Pinnacle Software because of it. I told him that I was working on a new system security program that would be head and shoulders above what Horizon was currently offering, but that I needed a couple of months to get it ready to implement. I asked, "Would you be willing to stay on month to month with Horizon until I could roll out my new program?" For the last 2 years, Nathan has not allowed me to program as part of my job, preferring to have me focus on system maintenance projects and all customer relations issues. Because of that, I have been writing code in my personal time, and I have it almost finished. Had I not gotten fired, I was going to lease it to Nathan after he had a chance to see the improvements over his current program, but now I will be free to market it on my own. Logan said, "I'd have to check with Dad before my answer can be final, but I'm quite certain we'd be willing to give you a few months to finalize it, and then, based on our evaluation, we could implement it here." I was able to move out of the hotel in 4 days into a very nice apartment, and though the monthly rent was rather high, I had the reserves to make it work for a few months. After the move, I spent 10 to 12 hours a day writing and testing code. I knew that I could have it ready for market soon, but I was driven to finish it and move on with my life. During that time, Rebecca was served with divorce papers. She called me numerous times, wanting to talk it through. I listened to all her voice messages, but there was nothing that I felt the need to talk to her about. She told me, "Michael, I admit I probably would have slept with Ryan if you hadn't stepped in, but I never did. I don't know what I was thinking, but I love you. Will you please call me?" She said, "Michael, I love you. I don't want a divorce, please call me." She said, Michael, can't you find a way to forgive me and stay married to me? She said, Michael, I miss you. I was sick of it, so I called Larry and asked him to contact Rebecca's attorney and tell him I would be seeking a restraining order if she didn't stop. Soon thereafter, I got a message from Rebecca. Michael, I love you and want with all my heart to put an end to this and spend the rest of my life loving you. I can't believe you want a restraining order against me, but if you need to do it, go ahead. This will be my last message to you. I want you more than life itself, but the ball is now in your court. I am sorry I hurt you so badly that you wouldn't even talk to me. I love you, honey. Call me anytime you want. True to her word, I got no further voicemails, texts, or anything. The effect wasn't quite what I expected because it put a final stroke to our marriage, even if we weren't divorced yet. It really did make me sad. 3 weeks flew by as I was working on my programs for many hours each day. On a Friday afternoon shortly after lunchtime, I got a call from Larry informing me that we had a court hearing scheduled for the following Tuesday morning with Judge Evelyn Foster. He said that wasn't good news because she had the reputation of being totally against divorce and put everyone through the hoops before ever granting one, if she granted it at all. When we arrived at the courtroom, Rebecca and her attorney were already there, and our case was called within a couple of minutes. Once seated, the bailiff called the courtroom to order. All rise, and we did. Judge Collins entered, sat down, and welcomed us to her courtroom. She turned to me and asked, as the petitioner in this divorce case, I am asking if you would drop this action and go home and work on your marriage. I replied, no, Your Honor. I want to continue the action. Judge Collins gave me a look of clear disapproval but said, well, okay then. She turned to Rebecca and asked, Mrs. Hastings, are you in agreement with this divorce action, or do you want to work on saving your marriage? Rebecca didn't hesitate. Your Honor, I absolutely do not want a divorce. I love my husband, and I want nothing more than to save my marriage. Judge Collins looked at me thoughtfully. Mr. Hastings, I have reviewed the petition carefully, recognizing that you're filing on the basis of irreconcilable differences. I note that your proposed settlement is extremely fair, and I see no indication of the usual vindictiveness we often see. Do you have any explanation for that? Your Honor, I don't hate her. I don't want to hurt her, and I have no reason not to be fair in a settlement. I just don't want to be married to her anymore because I don't love her anymore. Rebecca gasped when I said that, and I saw a hint of distress flash across her face. The judge continued, I think there's a really good chance that you two can work out your issues given the proper opportunity. I'm going to order marriage counseling with a very qualified counselor. I'm going to order 3 joint sessions, 1 initially, then 3 individual sessions for each of you, and then 2 additional joint sessions. The only exception to this ruling is if the counselor informs the court that there's no hope of saving this marriage. She struck her gavel. So ordered. Bam. Next case. I wanted to protest, but Larry held my arm and said, Michael, just go to the first session and see if you change your mind. If not, make it perfectly clear to the counselor that you want out, and see where it goes from there. Counseling was a disaster. Rebecca cried, apologized, and begged me to stop the divorce and work on our marriage. The counselor listened to me but didn't seem particularly sympathetic to my desire to end things. He asked, Michael, why don't you tell me why you won't consider working on your marriage? Dr. Benson, I began, let me tell you a story, not fiction, but it would read like a fairy tale to many. I was attending my company Christmas party and saw a girl across the room. Ever hear of love at first sight? It was love at first sight for me. My boss introduced me to his goddaughter, Rebecca, and I knew she was the woman I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I glanced over at Rebecca, who was smiling through her tears, looking wistful. She was perfect for me, and apparently I was perfect for her, because it wasn't long before we were deeply involved, and 3 months later, I asked her to marry me. After that, we didn't look back. I thought we were perfect. I paused, feeling my own sadness rise. It was love at first sight, Dr. Benson. I didn't grow into it, it wasn't something that happened over time. It was instantaneous love at first sight. Does that give you any hints as to my psychological makeup? I would think it would. So, if one can fall in love at first sight, it wouldn't be much of a stretch to have one fall out of love in an instant, would it? Rebecca was on a date with another man. She claimed she never had sex with him, and I actually believe her, but there's a very good chance she would have if I hadn't stepped in. She cheated on our marriage. Any way you want to look at it, a date with another man is cheating. And to add insult to injury, the man she was with was Daniel Adams, my worst enemy. She knew how much I despised him. Yet, there he was, the man she chose to betray me with. The counselor seemed taken aback by the intensity of my feelings. I went on, not just any place, either. She took him to the place that was most special to us, the place where we met, where I proposed to her, where we celebrated so many milestones. When I saw them sitting together, saw him touch her face, saw them toast each other, I felt my heart tear open, and that love I had started leaking out. By the time I walked out of the restaurant, it was gone. I don't want to be in a marriage where I don't love her. I cannot be any clearer than that, can I? Rebecca was openly crying by this time, and I felt bad for her, but it didn't change my resolve. I didn't love her anymore, and I wanted out of the marriage. I turned to her and said, "Rebecca, I am sorry. I don't want to hurt you, but can't you see my point? You wouldn't want to be married to me if I didn't love you, and I don't." Dr. Benson said, "Well, our time is up for today, but I think we have gotten everything out on the table at this time. I feel confident that we can make some further strides with the individual counseling, and I have high hopes that we will be able to reconnect you two. I'm going to recommend to the judge that these sessions should continue." At that moment, I was livid. After everything I just told you, there's no chance in hell that I am attending further counseling sessions. Have your sessions with Rebecca if you must, but I will not be attending any more. I got up and walked out of the office, thinking, how can anyone be so dense? 2 days later, I received a letter from the court with 3 dates scheduled for my individual counseling sessions. Needless to say, when the first date came and went without me attending, I was escorted to the courthouse and held in contempt of court. Judge Collins fined me $500 and warned that if I missed my next counseling session, I would be jailed. I told her, "You'll have to jail me then because I'm not going to any more counseling sessions." And that's exactly what happened. I skipped the next session, and 2 hours after my scheduled appointment, a police officer knocked on my door and escorted me to the county jail. What a lovely place that was. My attorney visited me each day and tried to convince me to go to the counseling, but I refused. On the 3rd day, I had another visitor. Nathan had come to see me and was allowed a 15-minute visit. He said, "Michael, I'm sorry you're going through this, and I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I should have seen how things were with you and been more supportive. I think I have a way out of this whole thing for you if you'll give me a chance to work through it with you. If you agree to the individual counseling, Judge Collins will let you out of jail. Then you and I can sit down and go over what I feel will be helpful in resolving your situation. All I ask is that you consider coming back to work for me afterward, no promises necessary, but just consider it." For the first time in quite a while, I felt good about something. Nathan had always been a friend, and he'd always been fair to me before the Rebecca situation blew up. I agreed to do as he asked and promised to think about going back to work for Pinnacle Software. The judge scheduled my first individual session for the next day, and I was escorted home by an officer who waited while I showered, shaved, and dressed for my appointment. He then escorted me to the session and waited for it to be completed. The session was what you'd expect, with all the psychological digging and probing, but I did everything I could to be as cooperative as possible. When the session was over, Dr. Benson escorted me out and informed the officer, "Mr. Hastings was very cooperative and has agreed to attend the next session a week from today." The officer said, "Very well, then, Mr. Hastings, you're free to go home. But let me caution you that if you miss next week's session, you will be taken before Judge Collins again, and, man, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes then. She is one tough woman when she gets pissed, so my advice is to not skip that session." I called Nathan and agreed to meet with him at my apartment the next day. He and I spent the whole morning talking through his proposed plan. We made all of the necessary arrangements to accomplish what we wanted and then went to lunch. After lunch, we sat down again to discuss my future involvement with Pinnacle Software. I said, "Nathan, I have always thought well of you, and you've been a good friend. But I need to do what's best for me. I don't know if you remember back when I got my last promotion, but you ordered me not to do any programming. You informed me that I was too valuable as a system maintenance manager and customer relations manager to get involved in programming. I love writing code, though, Nathan. So I've been working on a new security program that's generations beyond anything on the market today. Trust me when I say it would revolutionize system security across the country. Nathan looked interested. Michael, you mentioned this to Logan and George already, right? I nodded. They've agreed to be part of the test, yes. If successful, they would transition to my system, which would mean leaving Horizon. Nathan raised an eyebrow. But how were you planning to get around the non-compete clause in your contract? Nathan, the non-compete clause only applied if I quit or was fired for cause. Neither of those is the case. You fired me because I wouldn't try to work things out with Rebecca. My termination had everything to do with my personal situation and nothing to do with my work. Nathan smirked a little. Not to be contentious, because I'd like you back on the team, but I could have come up with some work-related issues if I wanted to. I laughed a bit, and he looked slightly offended that I didn't take him seriously. Nathan, I recorded our conversation when you fired me. I clearly asked if there were any work issues responsible for my termination, and you said no, that it was all about Rebecca. I have you on tape. Nathan looked taken aback. Why did you feel it necessary to tape that conversation? Because I know how much you care for Rebecca, and I suspected you would go all out to get me to work things out with her. I was just being cautious. He nodded, and I continued, I expect to make a fortune on this new software, and I'm willing to share that good fortune with you, Nathan, under certain conditions. I'll come back to work full-time, and my duties can remain the same for customer relations, but I'll need you to hire a system maintenance manager who will report to me. The remaining time, about 40%, will be dedicated to programming development. Although I'll be working full-time for you, I'll retain exclusive ownership of the software I develop. In exchange, I'll grant Horizon an exclusive license to market my programs, with a fixed royalty percentage payable to me. Once you see the software, I believe you'll agree it's more than fair. Nathan, ever the businessman, agreed. All right, Michael. I'll have our corporate attorney reach out to finalize the deal. My next scheduled counseling session came and went without me attending. As I had anticipated, the officer knocked on my door and escorted me to the courthouse, this time in cuffs. He smirked and said, I warned you, buddy, this time you're in trouble. When Judge Collins entered the courtroom, she looked furious. Well, Mr. Hastings, it seems you've done it again. I find you in contempt of court and hereby sentence you to 30 days in jail. Rebecca was present and, in an outburst, pleaded, No, Your Honor, please don't do that to Michael. I withdraw my objections to his request for divorce. Please grant it and don't send him to jail again. Judge Collins glared at her. It's too late for that. He's spending time in jail, period. At that, I rose and said, Your Honor, I'd like to approach the bench. She scowled. You are not allowed to address me directly, that is what you have an attorney for. I turned to Larry and said, Larry, you're fired. Now, Your Honor, I am representing myself and would like to approach the bench. Judge Collins reluctantly agreed, and both Rebecca's attorney and I approached. What is it, Mr. Hastings? Your Honor, I request a brief private meeting in your chambers to resolve this matter. I believe that if we have this meeting, everything will be settled to everyone's satisfaction. Judge Collins reluctantly agreed, and we reconvened in her chambers. Once there, I requested the meeting be off the record. She was about to protest when I added, Your Honor, I believe there are matters that would be best kept private for the sake of all involved. She finally nodded, dismissing the court recorder. Very well, Mr. Hastings, what do you want to discuss? Your Honor, I am here because I don't want to hurt anyone further. But I have reason to believe there's been a conflict of interest in this case due to your association with Rebecca's father. I don't want to cause unnecessary harm to anyone's reputation or relationships, and I'd like this divorce granted quietly without damaging anyone's lives. Rebecca's attorney looked deeply uncomfortable. Judge, Mr. Hastings has a point. Given his claims, perhaps it's best to settle this matter here. After a moment of silence, Judge Collins sighed. Mr. Hastings, you're granted the divorce. The property settlement will stand as presented. We returned to the courtroom, where she formally granted the divorce and set the terms. Rebecca would keep the condo and pay all related bills, and if she sold it, we would split the proceeds. Each of us retained our investment accounts and 401(k)s, and I kept half of the remaining savings. Judge Collins also reversed the 30-day jail sentence and fined me $500 instead, which I gladly paid. After the hearing, Rebecca asked if we could speak privately. In a small conference room, she apologized again, admitting she'd been trying to understand why she did what she did and promising to keep working with her counselor. She told me, "Michael, I'll always love you and hope you can forgive me." I replied, "Rebecca, I forgive you, and I don't hate you. But I don't love you anymore, and I think we both need to move on." I hugged her, then walked out, hearing her soft sobs behind me as I left. Over the next 6 weeks, I poured myself into completing the new security program. A week before I was set to go to Boston for the launch, I received a call from Rebecca. She said, "Michael, I've decided to sell the condo. I have an offer for $720,000, but if you want it, I'll sell it to you for half. Otherwise, I'll sell to the current buyer." I declined, telling her, "Go ahead and sell it, Rebecca. Have my half of the proceeds sent to my attorney. Also, why are you leaving?" She explained that she'd discovered her father's involvement with Judge Collins and needed a fresh start in another city. I wished her well, and we said goodbye. 2 weeks later, I arrived at Logan and George's company in Boston with my security software package. Logan greeted me with a warm hug, excited to get started. "Michael, let me introduce you to our new IT administrator," he said with a grin. I turned, and there stood Rebecca. I stared, momentarily stunned. Logan smiled. "Rebecca moved here recently and accepted the position. We know how talented she is, and I'm sure you'll work well together on this project." Trying to compose myself, I said, "I'll need a computer workstation to finalize a few things. I'll work some with Rebecca today, mostly prepping the package for implementation." Throughout the day, Rebecca was professional but made a point of engaging with me. She was still the witty, intelligent, and kind person I'd known, and I could tell she was trying to reconnect. As the day ended, we said goodbye, agreeing to see each other the next morning. Sitting in my hotel room later, I found myself thinking of her. I realized that despite everything, I missed her friendship. On a whim, I hacked into the company system, just a harmless backdoor I'd built in for emergencies, and found Rebecca's address. I bought her favorite wine and went to her apartment. The doorman called up, but Rebecca didn't respond. I figured she was out, so I decided to wait. A little later, I saw Rebecca walk in with another man. They embraced, and he kissed her. As they approached the elevator, the doorman pointed me out. Rebecca saw me and froze, whispering, "Oh no, not again." I walked over, handed the wine bottle to her companion, and said, "You two enjoy your evening." I turned to leave, but Rebecca ran after me, begging, "Michael, please don't go." Back at my hotel, I sent her an email. I thanked her for working together professionally but noted that I couldn't go back down this road. I said, "I was second-guessing myself about our divorce, but seeing you with someone else made me realize I made the right choice. Please don't contact me further." I attached instructions for activating the security software, with a 2-word password hint, broken promises. Sometimes, life doesn't lead you to another relationship but instead to peace within yourself. The royalties from my software allowed me to live comfortably, and I focused on rebuilding my self-esteem. I sought counseling and worked through my issues, dating occasionally but nothing serious. Maybe I'll find love again one day. For now, I'm content, finally at peace. Thanks for watching. Was Ethan right in his choices? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories.